Headship can be incredibly isolating. You are surrounded by people you cannot always speak openly to, you cannot always say what you are thinking, and you cannot always share what you are carrying. And if you do not have a trusted network around you, people that you can speak honestly to, that isolation deepens. This is where leadership starts, or can start, of course, to feel lonely. And loneliness is, in leadership terms, dangerous. This is Headship After Hours, the space for conversations school leaders rarely get to have during the day. Not the polished answers, not the official lines, just honest reflection on the weight of leadership, the things that keep you awake, and how to lead without losing yourself in the process. If Headship has felt heavier than you expected, you're in the right place. I'm Paul Collin. Let's talk. I want to start with something that I do not think we talk about enough in Headship. There is a moment, usually sort of early on, where the job just changes shape, not because of anything dramatic has happened, not because something has gone wrong necessarily, but because you suddenly realise how big the role actually is. And I do not mean, on paper. I mean, like the reality of it, the real life role. Sometimes, sitting kind of someone down in front of you, they kind of come in, they shut the door, and they tell you something, you weren't expecting to carry as a leader. Something maybe personal, something confidential, something heavy. You listen, of course you do that. That's the job. And then, 10 minutes later, you're expected to move straight on to the next thing, into maybe teaching and learning, into a staffing issue, into a complaint, into a meeting that was already diarised in your diary by your PA. And the day does not pause. There's this relentless kind of focus on the next thing. That, for me, was one of the moments where Headship stopped being theoretical and became very real. This episode is really about that feeling, that sense that the job is bigger and more overwhelming than you ever imagined it would be. Not because you are not capable, not because you are not good enough, but because the workload itself, it is structurally impossible. There is too many demands, too many competing priorities, too much emotional labour sitting alongside everything else. And if I'm honest, there are moments where it feels like burnout is not something in the distance. It feels close. You start wondering where the next bit of time is coming from, where the headspace is meant to appear, how you are supposed to do everything well all at once. One thing I was not prepared for is how much people talk to you as a head or a leader who is in charge. And I mean really talk. People kind of tell you things that they have not told anyone else. They share things that are deeply personal, sometimes things that can be quite shocking, sometimes things that are, of course, heartbreaking. And you hold it. Then almost immediately you are expected to switch. Different meeting, different tone, different issue, different version of you. That constant switching, that compartmentalizing of the events, of the moment, is exhausting. And there's no training for it. You're just expected to be able to do it. Over time, those conversations don't disappear. They sit somewhere, they get parked, they take up space. And that, of course, takes its toll. The pressure I felt most strongly was not always inside the school. It was the things that came from outside it. Parental complaints, for example, escalations, formal processes, subject access requests, emails that land and immediately demand time you don't have. You want to do right by everyone. Of course, as a leader, that's our natural intent. You really do. But the truth is, sometimes you can't. You cannot give the time or response you'd want to. And that, of course, creates tension. What makes it harder is the system starts to blame you for things that are not fully in your control. Attendance is a good example. We know the complexity behind it. Family circumstances, mental health, wider societal issues, and yet it lands on the head teacher's desk. That constant sense of responsibility without controlling is draining. Headship can be incredibly isolating. You are surrounded by people you cannot always speak openly to. You cannot always say what you are thinking, and you cannot always share what you are carrying. And if you do not have a trusted network around you, people that you can speak honestly to, that isolation deepens. This is where leadership starts, or can start, of course, to feel lonely. And loneliness is, in leadership terms, dangerous, because when leaders stop talking, they stop processing. And when that happens, everything feels heavier than it needs to. Here is the part I think really matters. Headship is all encompassing. It's a vocation, like teaching is. Of course, we know that. We don't go into teaching to become wealthy, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. If it's done sustainably, if you have the right things in place, if well-being is protected properly, not just talked about, if collaboration is real, it can be amazing. And for me, staying connected to teaching really mattered. Staying grounded in the classroom really mattered. That is why most of us came into education, isn't it, in the first place, to make a difference to children. That should not, in my opinion, get lost. You know, it shouldn't disappear into what becomes an ivory tower, an office that you sit in. And if you're listening to this thinking, yes, this sounds familiar, then you are exactly who this is for. This is not about fixing everything. This is not about having all the answers. It's about giving yourself permission to pause, to name how this actually feels, and to be curious about other ways of doing things. You only know what you know. And that's a great kind of phrase to remember. Leadership does not have to be done alone. If something in this episode resonated, sit with it for a moment. Leadership is not meant to be carried in silence. If this conversation helped you feel less alone, that of course matters. This is Headship After Hours. We will, of course, with every episode, keep talking and stay connected.